What's up, everybody? Jason from Jason's Exotic Reptiles back at you with another video. We talk a lot about why you should breed reptiles. Let's flip the script and talk about the negatives of breeding reptiles. Before we dive in the video, per the usual, we're going to show off this awesome guy right here. This is a Redline Hypo Motley Aztec Fire that's 100% het T-positive albino. He's one of my future breeders. He's not quite there yet. He's still a little bit small. Next year or maybe later this season he could breed for me, but I might give him an extra year to give him that size. Really pretty animal. I'm loving how the Fire interacts with the IMG in this one. He just kind of starts to get this freckling all about the sides. Still have that Motley Aztec pattern there. Just an awesome boa that I can't wait to see what we can make with him in the future. We're going to put him back and dive into why you should not breed reptiles. There are clear reasons why breeding reptiles is awesome. It can be a cool hobby. You get the excitement of seeing new babies popping out. And then it's just something that you could have a whole business out of if you really wanted it to be. But there are also some drawbacks and negatives. And I made a video on this years ago, but I keep getting asked from people. They're saying, well, you keep pushing why you should breed reptiles, how awesome it is breeding reptiles. And I never tell people that, yes, you should be a reptile breeder. It's always something that you need to decide on your own. Is this the right decision for you? And some of the negatives are what we're going to dive into today. So number one is this breeding itself puts reptiles under a tremendous amount of stress. It can cause health problems with them, no different than with people. Anytime people have babies, the females of the snakes can also have health complications. They can have impaction with the babies. They can have things go wrong and become septic. So anytime you're breeding, you're risking the health of both the male and the female. So something to consider is if these are your pets and you just cannot risk these animals getting these health issues, then do not breed reptiles. This is not something for you. And I almost think you should have some experience keeping. So when something isn't right, you notice it and you can pick up on those signs before it becomes something that's actually really bad and you can't fix it. I've been doing this a long time and I can kind of tell when something isn't looking right. You can try to supersede and get around that problem before it becomes a problem that's going to kill your animal. The next piece about this is that when you breed reptiles and keep reptiles in general, this is constant care. Now, you might think, oh, it's not a big deal. I have constant care. I'm keeping these animals already. But if they give you 20, 30 babies, and let's say you breed 4 or 5 animals that year, you could be sitting on hundreds of babies at a time, taking care of hundreds of babies, feeding those hundreds of babies. All of this is a huge time component that a lot of people aren't prepared for when they first get into breeding reptiles. So this is something you need to consider, that it seems great. I get to see all these cool babies, but I might be taking care of hundreds of babies for a really long time, which goes to the next point is once you have these babies, you need to sell them. Selling is not as easy as people think. When you breed reptiles, whether you're doing 1 litter or 100 litters, some type of marketing is going to be required in order to make this a successful sale. So you can't just take these babies, post them up off Morph Market. Sometimes if you just do 1 or 2 litters, you could go to your local pet store and you could wholesale them out. But if you're doing this for a profit perspective, that's something you need to account for, is that a lot of people are breeding this and they're trying to get top dollar for their babies. They don't want to let them go for any less than what the market price is. And they're sitting on these animals for a really long time. When I make babies, I always have the intention that I may need to keep these animals for 2 years plus. Some of these animals might just raise up as breeders for me in the future, but a lot of them I'm selling, and that's a component that I need to focus on. So talking about the sales and breeding, you also have to deal with people. If you're not a people person, you're probably not going to like selling reptiles or breeding reptiles, because both of those are hand in hand and you need to deal with people in the process. I personally like dealing with people. I like dealing with the pet keeper and the newer breeder. Why? Is because there's a little bit of an education component to it. You build your trust with that person, and I can watch that person grow as a keeper or a breeder. When I'm dealing with a more experienced breeder, oftentimes it's the sale that happens and I never talk to that person again. Not because I don't want to, it's just that's how the nature of sales go when you start dealing with the more high-end reptiles. Now at the same time, if you say, well, that's the type of person I want to deal with, that high-end reptile keeper, it goes back to my point about marketing. If you're going to be selling these high-end reptiles, your marketing has to be really strong. because why is this person going to give you their $10,000 or their $5,000? They don't know you from anywhere when they can give it to me or somebody else. I've put the time in, built a reputation, done a lot of marketing, and I got my name there so that my name's going to show up before yours. And if we hold all things equal, generally the person's going to go with the person that has the larger reputation. Another reason why you may not want to breed reptiles, this goes into the marketing perspective, but you're going to need to learn a lot of new skills. These skills can include taking photos, editing photos, building websites, these things that you may not have any desire to do or have any time to do. So these are time components, and this is a skill level that if you are interested in learning new skills like photography and photo editing, website design, utilizing different tools and sales platforms, then maybe reptile breeding is for you. But it really is a lot. When it starts to get pretty overwhelming is when you have a lot of babies and you need to take 500 photos and edit 500 photos and post 500 photos. It's a lot of time and effort to do that. So if you like that, then maybe it's for you. But if you do not like that, then potentially reptile breeding is not in your future. Another critical component is the duration between what you're spending and then when you actually see profit. So reptile breeding, there are no shortcuts. There are people who will try to get a shortcut. I'm going to buy adults. I'm going to buy this or that. And they're trying to supersede and beat the system. There's no way to beat the system. You really have to buy the babies, young juvenile animals, raise them up, put in your time, hope you have success breeding them, and then try to turn the profit with that so you can turn it back. That's if you're breeding as a business. If you're just doing it as a hobby keeper, there's still a lot of money investment involved, and you're going to need to recoup some of that money. For instance, again, you have 20, 30 babies, you need to spend hundreds of dollars to buy a rack to keep them in or some caging to keep them in. You can't just buy a 10-gallon tank for 15 bucks, throw them all in a cage and hope that they sell in the next week. It's not how it works. So there's the startup cost, and then there's the time before you start seeing a return. You're going to need to buy cameras or some photo editing software. You're going to need to invest into a website or a Morph Market account or both like I have. There's a lot of money involved before you actually start seeing the profit. So if you're not comfortable with putting that money forward, then maybe reptile breeding as a business is not for you. You can certainly do it at a hobby level and just have fun with it, but expect that you need to breed only what you're comfortable managing at that certain scale. So again, at some point, it tips from this hobby level to I'm a breeder, as opposed to just I'm doing it as a hobby breeder and I had a couple litters of babies. So consider that with your breeding and how you want to progress your plans. One of the last pieces I'm going to talk about is relating to the customers, but every time you sell an animal, you're putting an animal from where you have it could be a great home into potentially not a great home. So you've placed this animal in a home and all of a sudden they start looking into care advice from other people, YouTube, Facebook. They start following that instead of the advice that you give them for your animal, and now the animal is not thriving. They come back and they blame you and they totally digress from your advice. This is a problem that you now need to deal with and maybe something you're not prepared for. So there's a component of that is that you're producing a lot of animals, you're selling them to people, and you don't know where they go. You can use your best judgment and try to do your best to make sure they go to good homes, but ultimately you need to kind of take some chances and hope that that person is going to do the care that you are advising on, and they're going to set them up in the right enclosure, the right home. So this is another factor to consider, is if you just can't deal with putting an animal into a home where it may not thrive, then reptile breeding may not be for you either. With all that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe and drop a comment down below. Let me know if you agree, disagree, some of the problems that you've had as a breeder or things that you've heard from people trying to sell you to be a breeder. I'm interested. I want to hear it. If you're looking for animals, whether you want to be a breeder or just a hobby keeper, check out my website, jasonsexoticreptiles.com. And if you want to join a community of like-minded keepers and breeders, check out my Patreon, patreon.com/jasonsexoticreptiles. Till next video, let's keep it moving.